Get access to every video that we've ever deleted as well as our brand new podcast by going to neopunkxsim.com. Now let's get into the video. For as long as Rockstars have existed, they've had an aura of mystery, not caring, and not trying. Or at least looking like they weren't trying. To explain it, we'll have to go back to the beginning. Whoa! Not that far! Stop! There. The 1950s. Rock and roll was born out of rebellion against the social norms, which made it dangerous and cool, specifically to rebellious teenagers. This was perfect timing, because right after World War II, the word teenager was just invented, and had suddenly become a very marketable demographic. This was especially profitable because young people are insecure by default, and, even more than adults, they need to be cool. On the other side of the market, this meant that artists had to go out of their way to seem cool, lest their music fall into the hands of nerds and they lose their aura. And as an artist, the best, and really only place to build your aura and look mysterious was when you were getting interviewed by a major news network or TV channel. Before social media, fans had no clue what their favorite artists were up to on a day-to-day basis, making them seem a lot less relatable and a lot more like an otherworldly rock god. The only time fans had a chance to learn more about who they were personally came down to what few interviews they may have on TV or magazines, and for the most part, if they were lucky, they would get one or two of these in a year. The result? It was very easy for an artist to be viewed in the exact way that they wanted to. So naturally, interviews quickly became sandboxes to play around in, and used as a platform to show the world just how quirky they were. Now, you might think that the trend of abusing interviewers to look cool started in the 1970s with punk rockers like Gigi Allen and Sid Vicious. But the real forefather of the movement is Bob Dylan, whose schizo-twink ramblings kept his career afloat through the acid years and into the cocaine ones.
How many people who labor in the same musical vineyard in which you toil, how many are protest singers?
Well, I think there's about 136.
You say about 136? Or do you mean exactly 136?
It's either 136 or 142.
For Dylan, this was partly a consequence of being a glue-sniffing hippie weirdo, but it was also a deliberate move to create a mysterious image, not unlike Playboi Carti. Later on, alternative rock artists of the 80s and 90s like Dinosaur Jr. and Yo La Tengo paved the way for vocalists who sound like they're fighting against 5 or 6 NyQuil.
Germany was real uptight.
Sandwiches.
In the wake of punk rock's victory over glam metal, this was the image to pursue, and it extended not only to the music, but to its presentation.
We just don't have anything to say about anything, really. It's
all become one big blobby blur.
yeah, I mean, it's like really is very difficult for us to answer the simplest questions.
You know what? When we were mixing it, we were really sick, and Kurt went down to the health department, and he got these codeine cough syrups, and we were just popping those, and we were just like in La La Land, cooking on this codeine joy juice.
In a moment of television history more devastating than the collapse of the towers, iconic sleepyheads Beck and Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth co-hosted a programming block on MTV. What happened next can only be described as two grown men who both obviously care about their image, trying to not care each other for 120 minutes straight.
So Beck, your song Loser, man, it's a smash hit. How do you feel about that?
It's like surfing in some oil spillage.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, that's it, man. What exactly is your real name? Is it Beck? Were you christened Beck? All right.
This is a chilling demonstration of a universal law of not giving a fuck. The most dangerous thing an interviewer can do is put two stone-cold chillers in the same room. It's like pointing two microphones at each other. Each has such a need to prove that they care the least what others think of them that they can't help but escalate the situation in a feedback loop until you never want to listen to either of their music ever again. Incidentally, Thurston Moore would come up again in this story, infamously treating literally the only interviewer that anyone cares about the same way those kids on Skype treated Chris Chan. But if we're talking about self-aware 90s rock stars that tried to not try, there was absolutely no better artist better known for this than Kurt Cobain, the ultimate salesman of the Gen X slacker image. With the fall of hair metal and the rise of grunge, being authentic and real replaced leading a life of glamour and excess as the coolest thing an artist could do. And the biggest spearhead of this change was Kurt, which was ironic, because everything about his persona was totally commodified, and he was stacking bricks off of it. From his unkempt style, to his attitude, to his greasy hair, Kurt's persona was as perfectly sculpted as his chin. In the midst of Nirvana mania, Kurt did everything he could to make sure it looked like he didn't care about any of it. In interviews, he made sure to appear utterly bored, like he'd rather be anywhere else doing anything else. Questions relating to the meaning of his lyrics, his thoughts on fame, or anything serious at all was met with dismissal, disinterest, and sarcasm. The millions of angsty children of divorce across the world ate that shit up, and he knew it. Kurt claimed to not know anything about music theory, even saying that he didn't know the names of simple chords. His approach to guitar was unconventional, sure, but there was no way in hell that it was the work of someone who knew as little about music theory as he claimed. It just sounded cool to people who didn't actually know shit about music. He didn't want to be lumped in with the self-indulgence of the rock stars of the 80s, so instead, he was self-indulgent in his own way. He curated every little aspect of his image to fit the punk rock ideal of cool. He dressed in mismatched layers of rags and ripped jeans to ensure it seemed like he didn't care about fashion or the way he looked, which of course had become the hot new style that was sold in magazines. He constantly played down his commercial success, even complaining about it at times, when secretly, he would call MTV if they didn't play a Nirvana video frequently enough. He claimed the band rarely ever practiced, but in reality, he was a drill sergeant about making sure that they did every single day for hours on end. Back then, it all seemed authentic, at least in comparison to whatever was happening in the 70s and 80s. Kurt Cobain was the coolest, most uncool figure in the public eye. Despite the fame, glory, and tons of cash that he bathed in, he carefully upkept his punk rock attitude, which was like a job of its own outside of the actual music, and arguably made him at least as much money. There's no mistaking the intentionality behind it all, and nobody did it quite like him. He kept up his anti-establishment image, all while reaping plenty of benefits from said establishment. On the surface, it seemed like Kurt was taking a stand and spitting on the conventional image of the rock star, but really, he just redefined what being a rock star meant, making himself the kingpin of his own monopoly. He became the new standard for everything that he had claimed to hate. The truth, of course, eventually came out. Kurt Cobain reached that kind of fame where there was nowhere and nothing to hide anymore. Within his personal journals from before all the fame are the plans of a normal kid from a normally fucked up childhood who did, in fact, want to be a rock star. From entries detailing his plans for when he would hit it big, to written practice interview questions with pre-scripted answers that would make him sound aloof, Kurt's realness and his story of never caring about fame were inarguably debunked. Also in his journals was a list of his top 50 albums of all time, and honestly, it's super weak. To label Kurt Cobain's persona as fraudulent would be a bit unfair. At the end of the day, it's more like a pro wrestling character. Kurt started out just like thousands of others, a kid that just wanted to be a rock star. So he played up the character of the disinterested punk rock slacker who couldn't care less about fame, from which he gained unprecedented levels of hella fame. As it turns out, doing heroin to self-medicate for your hot girl stomach problems, then with a shotgun, leaving behind your 2-year-old daughter, is probably the coolest thing that anybody has ever done. Nirvana made a career out of bringing strange, underground music to the mainstream, and the same is true for Kurt Cobain's influence on artists' public personas. From the 90s on out, entering a dissociative state when asked how your career is going was no longer just the way that you would respond to your family every Thanksgiving. It was the first rule in the music interview playbook. But the only thing bigger in the 90s than Nirvana was a hip little invention we at Neopunk call the World Wide Web. And on the internet, a whole new generation of virgins with something to prove was coming of age. As early as its widespread adoption, the internet had a reputation for being home to angry, insecure trogs. In its early days, the internet was the last refuge of antisocial nerds, and they developed a strong culture of flame wars, the humble art of being really mean on the computer, all facilitated by anonymity, an absence of face-to-face communication, and a strong desire to keep your page of the forum for the true heads. As the reach of the internet grew, and this culture persisted, all of a sudden everybody on Earth had the chance to feel like a big boy. In certain internet circles, like 4chan's R9K board, we can observe a fascinating subversion of the norm. Like normal people, they value gatekeeping and bullying, but in their topsy-turvy, kooky crazy world, real-world coolness is totally antithetical to authenticity and belonging. If you have ever had sex, or could theoretically ever have sex, you are not one of us. I mean one of them. A more modern example could be the Dime Square art scene, based out of a neighborhood in Brooklyn, whose #1 export is podcasts and is home to some of the coolest 36-year-olds on earth. But overall, the internet is a place where being cool and not giving a fuck is a necessary value. Losing an argument, making any sort of factual error, using the wrong "your," being cringe, all are grave mistakes and deeply embarrassing personal failures. You've probably done at least one of these things, and you know how incentivized you feel to demonstrate your coolness online whenever possible. And it would come back around to the artists too. In the internet age, musicians have more access than ever to their fans, and vice versa, playing the interview game has become even stranger. It started casually, with artists like Crystal Castles, who grew up on Usenet and MySpace, totally entrenched in IDGAF culture. To younger artists like them, the personal connection and life updates fans wanted could be served fresh on blogs and social media, and interviews became just a place to demonstrate your powerful aura.
I would spend a day at an amusement park with Helen Keller, for sure. I really don't listen to electronic music or anything. I just don't really get it.
But as we all know, things would only get worse from 2008 onwards, and not just for Crystal Castles. As normies latched onto the ironic interview, the true selves had to push things even further into post-irony. Death Grips, famously, has only given 3 interviews in 13 years, and one of them is actually an art piece they staged themselves, which has no questions and no answers. From a band like the DGs, as we like to call them, it's a clear backlash to the vapidity and pointlessness of not only the traditional interview, but even the ironic subversion of the traditional interview. In more recent years, artists like Playboi Carti have pushed that idea even further. With Death Grips, the absence of the interview had weight. The fact that they wouldn't do an interview was the message. Carti, on the other hand, would do pretty regular interviews in the earlier part of his career.
Hit me up in the DMs, I reply.
But as he began to develop his mysterious King Vamp rockstar persona, he stopped doing interviews entirely for 5 years, building up an aura of suspense as he became more and more of an eerie, cult-like figure every day. That is, until he suddenly and unexpectedly blew all the tension he'd accumulated, not with a high-effort art piece interview like Death Grips, but with an on-the-spot TikTok fit check that totally underwhelmed and disappointed any fan who made the mistake of getting invested.
How much for the bullets, my boy? Opium. Oh, opium. Okay, I see the kicks, my boy. How for the kicks? 1-on-1. 1-on-1.
Once again, the message was that the artist wasn't trying and didn't care, and if you did, you fucked up. It's also a reminder of how effective Playboi Carti's strategy of privacy really is, with fans latching onto any new piece of content like barnacles, no matter how banal it is. Other internet-era artists, sort of like the 4chan users who made a positive reputation out of being losers, aren't trying to be mysterious and cool like Death Grips or Playboi Carti, but still make use of that sweet Gen Z post irony. The 100 Gex Genius interview has a casual vibe, sort of like Crystal Castles or Kurt Cobain, but the difference between Gen X and millennial sarcasm and Gen Z irony is as big as the difference between the lowly banana and the mighty plantain. The hyperpop duo are almost embarrassingly low effort as they explain how they wrote Money Machine, but they never seem like they don't care. Dylan Brady only appears twice in the entire video, but when he sings his verse, he changes into an entire costume and takes on the nasal quiver of a pop-punk ballad.
Tell me what's the deal, I've been trying to go to bed, I've been up for days, I've been trying to get it.
The image they present is that they're not really invested, but it's not an insult or disrespectful towards genius, just a way of life for digital natives with no attention span. Shed Theory also demonstrates their high school meme page pedigree in their Our Generation Music interview, using their precious minutes mostly to talk about how much they love watching porn and coming and themselves.
I shaved my pubic hair for this. As long as we got the internet and I can watch Pornhub, I'll be straight.
We got mad magazines from Japan, Japanese porn
naked shit. We're gonna eat candy in the shower and then take a bath together.
It sounds a little off-putting from the outside, but the vibe of the interaction and their music is that they're all just fucking around trying to make each other laugh. And for once, the interviewer is a participant instead of a victim, as they eventually break him into their sense of humor.
We're gonna kiss and come.
Yo, white humor is the funniest humor. You can't tell me no different.
It works just as well on the fans watching the interview from home. Just like OGM's Hakeem Rowe, we get to feel like we're just hanging out and shitposting with friends. Artists like 100 Gex and Shed Theory are a welcome change to the standard interview subversions that Kurt Cobain cemented as the norm in the 90s. Like a lot of other people their age, they're questioning the value of constantly trying to act hard and prove that you care less than everyone else, instead opting to be casual and open and just try to have a good time without putting anyone else down. In a culture that's this heavily defensive and brain-rotted, it might be the closest thing that we have to Nirvana. No, not that guy. I mean the Buddhist state of enlightenment. None of us are really above caring about things, and anyone who really was probably wouldn't make very good music. To embrace cringe is to live free. To reject it is to die cringe.